just trying to communicate wordlessly with, oh boy, I don't know what it is. You just, the eternal struggle of every parent is, the minute you pick up a phone or get in some kind of conversation, that is exactly when everybody needs to rush into the room and ask you everything. It's amazing. Never fails. Okay, so in an attempt to get my train of thought back, I'll just do the intro and then we can get right into it. Well, welcome back to another episode of Scouting Stuff. You have, again, got two of us today, but different set of people. Well, I'm still here. Scouter Ken, I'm still here. But I'm, again, not joined by Scouter Colin. I really have to get back with that guy. I'm joined today by Siobhan Ward from, well, you know what, Siobhan, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, who you are, what council you're with, because that was the question I was going to ask, and then we'll get into what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so I wear the very mythical multiple hats in scouting. In my day job, I am a youth program specialist, so I work for Scouts Canada. I develop and create program. But in the evenings, I am Mang. I am a Cub Scouter with 1st Blackburn Pack in Voyageur Council, so if you're in Ottawa.
Brilliant. So, yes, now we were connected. I'm trying to actually remember how the connection happened. I think Scouter Mike is to blame for all of this.
Yeah.
Because we ended up in there was a bit of a discussion about the strategic development goals and how they relate to scouting. And then at some point he tagged me into the discussion because he figured it would make a good podcast episode. And I actually have to agree because I know we've done SDG related stuff. That's strategic development goals, SDG. So there's the acronym for you. I know we've done SDG related stuff with like our Cubs and our Scouts. I know there's program content and badge content available on scouts.ca relating to it. And obviously, like I see it crop up doing the Scouting 5 news bits that I do. I see it crop up in international scouting news fairly often. They come up again and again and again. But to be honest, I have only the vaguest idea of what they are. And so why don't we start there? Like, what are the SDGs? What are the strategic development goals?
Yeah, so I'm going to hop in. It's sustainable development goals. It's a really easy one that we make it up. Right. I am not offended. It is not the first time. It is a blunder I have made regularly. It's a blunder that is honestly
sustainable, right? That makes more sense.
Yeah, it's great, but aim. They are strategic goals, so that makes sense. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a series of 17 goals that were released by the United Nations in 2015. They replaced what were the Millennium Development Goals, I believe was the original name, which was a series of 6 or 7 goals released in 2000 for the next 15 years. A lot of countries, and especially a lot of citizens, struggle to grasp the Millennium Development Goals because, frankly, in Canada, they were things that we don't see every day. So they are issues that may exist in Canada, but not something an everyday Canadian may see. So things like child mortality and reducing child and maternal mortality, things like improving access to clean water and education, things like that. And honestly, a lot of progress was made on the Millennium Goals between 2000 and 2015. So the United Nations said, hey, let's take it further. And so they did. So they released 17 goals, basically trying to improve life, improve the world that can be done by any country in the world. So they relate to things like climate action and various environmental goals related to reducing the impact of climate change, increasing equality around the world, whether that's gender equality, whether that's equality between immigrants, refugees, people of color, minorities. And then things like, things related to the economy, creating industry, building sustainable, effective infrastructure, creating communities that are sustainable and accessible, and everything like that. So that's kind of the, what the Sustainable Development Goals are in under 5 minutes.
Okay. So, and I knew they were a UN creation. I had never made the connection with the Millennium Development Goals, but I do remember those being a hot topic, certainly some years prior. I'm going to ignore that call because it appears to be spam. So, I gotta keep an eye on it, just in case work actually does need to get in touch with me. Anyways, so yeah, I remember the MDGs, and So, okay, this is the follow-up to those, and that's good. And it seems they've expanded the set as well from 6 to 7 to 17, you said.
Yeah.
And again, I knew they were put forward by the UN. So they've obviously been taken up. I assume that it's kind of been the World Organization, WASM, that has sort of taken these up initially and is encouraging NSOs to get on board with them. Is that kind of how that process is working?
Yeah, so really WASM does absolutely need to get credit for leading the charge. They were the first people to really pick this up, from my knowledge. I mean, there were probably some National Scout organizations, NSOs, who picked this up before, but WASM has been a huge champion for this at major events. So things like the World Jamboree back in 2019, Jamboree on the internet, things like that. There's always been some sort of SDG presence over the last couple of years. So that is definitely something that we used as a jumping off point for developing our program. We've also really leaned into some of other NSO's creations and how they've been looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. But we have been pretty proud because we were definitely one of the first people to kind of jump on this, at least kind of in the English-speaking scouting world, just because that's the resource that are most accessible to us. But yeah, WASM has definitely been leading the charge, and I think they jumped on this about 2016. They were on it pretty much right away.
Nice. And okay, so obviously you mentioned Scouts Canada's program then was sort of developed based on all of the groundwork that they had laid. So what is our program? What are the major intersections between how we do scouting in Canada and the SDGs and, I guess WASM's vision for how, and I guess just to World Organization of the Scouting Movement, WOSM, WASM. Yeah. Just if you hear me say that, that's what that means. So, how are we really incorporating them? What is our specific take on them?
Yeah, so just like kind of WASM started off with, we are mimicking them in terms of we are starting out, and kind of we have been starting out by making sure we're recognizing what our members and what our scouts are already doing to contribute to these goals. Because that's the biggest piece of feedback we've gotten so far, or one of the biggest pieces. Scouts are saying, hey, wait a second, we already do a lot of this. We, plant trees every year. That's a big contribution to life on land. Or we do a food drive or a snowsuit drive every year. That's contributing to no poverty and zero hunger. What's different? And that's a big way we started, is recognizing the successes we've already had and making sure our scouters and our youth especially understand that they're already doing good things for the world. They're already making these incredible contributions that many young people their age may not even know are a thing, right? That's a super cool thing about scouting. And then our next big thing is we want to challenge our youth and our scouters to take it further. Okay, so you've been doing your food drive every year. You've stood in your local grocery store. You've collected cans. You've collected money. What's next? We know that zero hunger isn't just about filling food banks. What are the root causes of people, not being able to access food? What are the root causes of food waste? And how can we address them? What can you do as a Cub Scouter to help your pack understand and address these things? So that's where a lot of more of our activities and kind of more of our bigger challenges start with, is, okay, you understand the basics. You've already been doing great things. What else can you do? What can you do next?
All right. And so I'll make sure there's a link to this in the show notes, because I'm assuming this is still the current page for it. There's what is the page title here? Scouts for Sustainability. And that seems to be sort of the landing page for everything to do with SDGs within the program. And as you might expect from a Scouts Canada page, there's program resources. There's a link here that says take action, which if I click through it, takes me to, you can submit activity and also find activity ideas. So cool. So, and then of course there's FAQ, but of course, I guess it wouldn't be a scouting program if there wasn't a badge. And I see there is the first link here on the page, or one of the first links here on the page, is badge requirements. So obviously then part of how we've integrated this into the program is to offer a badge for it. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you do. So we know that I don't say as much as we don't want badges to be like the center of a program. As much as we know that badges are not the center of a program for every youth, for every scout, or for every group, we know that it's a thing. We know that people love badges, and we know that it helps to kind of make ideas a bit more concrete, if that makes sense. Like, not necessarily, kind of gives you a goalpost. So we have created a it's technically 9-part badge. So it looks like the Duke of Edinburgh is awarding the fact that there's a bronze, silver, and gold level, and they do get progressively more challenging as you go through. We have also divided each of those levels, so each of those stages, whichever you want to call them, into 3 themes. So we've grouped the goals because 17 goals is a lot. As much as we would have loved to make a 17-part badge, none of the uniforms are big enough to accommodate that. So, we had to think outside the box. We have divided them into 3 themes. So we have environment, so pretty straightforward. We have society and culture, and then we have innovation or economy. A lot of these are the economic goals. They're usually called prosperity in some UN language, but for the sake of explaining it to someone who's 6 years old, we've gone with innovation. It's coming up with new and creative ideas to help the world. It's a lot easier to explain than explaining the economy.
Yeah.
So all that to say is we have developed these badge requirements, and they are tied to doing some sort of sustainable action. So everything on the website should be up to date. So it has the basics of what you need to do. You need to explore different projects related to the goals. These projects, we keep it vague, just like the top section awards. You can make it as challenging for your section as you want, or simpler, and do some projects to explore the goals. So a lot of people hopefully got a good start if they participated in Around the World in 60 Days, because a lot of those were really great projects. And this has all been integrated into Scouts Tracker. That is usually the next $1 million question after, are there badges? Is it in Scouts Tracker yet? Yes, it is. But for those who aren't in Scouts Tracker, you can also just track it however you normally track badges. And once you've done a couple of projects or actions related to a goal, you're on your way to your badge.
And what I like about the landing page here is how it's set up. Like I just kind of clicked into, so you go to the badge requirements page, and the first thing you get, of course, is the Achieving the Sustainability Badge PDF. So, like you explained, you're connecting to the different themes and completing different projects along the lines of those themes. But what I also like is a little further down the page, there's you can look at it. There's drop downs or expanding content areas for colony, pack, troop, company, and crew. So you could, if you're beavers, cubs, scouts, adventurers, rovers, you can click in and get a little bit more of an idea of, exactly how the SDGs incorporate into your program. And then, of course, at the bottom of each of those sections, there's all 17 of the sustainability goals. Each of them has a nice little graphic. And then you can click on that. So like if I'm clicking on the no poverty one, for example, I see it links me to personal achievement badges for the beavers, Canada Beaver or Community Beaver. And then if I click through to like good health and well-being, that links, it's showing that links to Beavers of the World and to Chef Beaver and to Olympic Beaver and to Camping Skills 1 and Trail Skills 2 and Winter Skills 3. It shows how pursuing the sustainability goals ultimately links you to, for lack of a better way of putting it, regular program content, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we wanted to make sure that Scouters especially understood that this isn't a standalone program. This isn't a separate program, and it's not a replacement. A lot of Scouters were concerned that we were 4 years into the Canadian Path rollout and somehow already replacing it. Like, no, this should fit into your regular programming. Maybe you're doing slightly different activities. Maybe you're having some different conversations or using different review questions. But overall, you should still be running your same, pack programming and running it in the same plan to review and using youth input as you already do. It shouldn't be changing that. It shouldn't change the format. And hopefully it's going to link back, as you mentioned, to other badges, to other initiatives, to things you're already working on. So it's not just, it's standalone.
Nice. And I do think that's an important point that you made because, even I don't think I ever had the impression that, this is going to replace the badge program, but certainly there is a temptation at least to, because at the end of the day, we're volunteers trying to run program for our groups. And, I remember the rollout of Canadian Path. I was really excited for Canadian Path, and I was trying to make it work in my group fairly early on, even before it had kind of been formally launched, as some of the materials became available. But then once it did launch, the materials kind of trickled out thereafter. And a lot of times that just seems to be the way with, and unfortunately, that does seem to be the way with Scouts Canada, is that, something will be launched and the materials for it are coming soon, but they're not quite there necessarily everything you need to know from the get-go. And so as a volunteer, you have these guidelines and you're trying to build program that, meet that within these guidelines. And it just feels like a lot. And then something else comes along and it can feel like, well, I have to be either or about this, right? Like I can either keep doing what I'm doing or I can do this new thing, but it's going to largely, even if it isn't intended to, it's going to largely supplant what I was doing previously. And so I like the way that this has been developed and presented because it really does show that you can just keep doing essentially what you're doing. Because, in a way, a lot of this is what we should be doing anyways, as part of Scouts, right? I mean, anything to do with the environment, right? Like that has kind of been at the core of Scouting from the beginning. Leave the world a little better than you found it, right? Has been a governing philosophy of how we do outdoor activities forever. And even if some of this stuff isn't necessarily as applicable to Canada, I mean, I know there are communities in Canada that do struggle with clean water, with, having secure access to clean water. Some of the Indigenous communities have been in the news recently for exactly that reason. But you're right. In general, you and I and most of the kids that are going to be attending our programs, clean water isn't even a thing that they think about, right? And it is kind of amazing if you think about it in the context of the world. The same water that I use to water my tomato garden and flush my toilet, I can, that's the drinking water too, right? Like we have such an abundance of clean water that we can actually use it for those non-consumption purposes. And that's definitely not true of many other places in the world. So I get that, something like clean water isn't necessarily at front and center in the mind of our newer Cubs and Scouts. And it's unfortunate too that right now we have a crop of Beavers and Cubs and even Scouts newer to the program who haven't really experienced camping because for the last 2 years that has mostly not been an option. But obviously, if we could be running the camping side of the program, clean water would be something that would be at least a little bit more in the front of mind for a lot of these youth, because once you get away from, your home and the taps, clean water either means you're carrying it in or you're purifying it yourself somehow. So just, again, looking over these program categories, it is easy to see how a lot of them, or at least a number of them, can be essentially touched on by just doing what we already do. Even things like, good health and well-being, zero hunger, right? Because, at the end of the day, we do touch on food and how to prepare food and all of that stuff. Again, so a lot of that gets tied up with camping, but, it is easy to see how a lot of this could be tied into the program. Some of it maybe a little less so. But even then, again, that sort of depends a little bit on where you are. Me being in Alberta, something like life below water, I have a different, that's something that I would have a different perspective on than someone who lives in, say, a coastal area. That said, there are a lot of lakes in Alberta and in Canada. So it is good to see all the different ways that this can be incorporated just by running the program we already run. And really all it takes is just a little more thought when you're going into your planning to be just like, this does that, and this is to that.
And that's exactly it. And that's a lot of the resources and supports we've tried to create are helping Scouters and youth to make that connection, to jump from, we're at camp this weekend, we have to carry in all our water, to how does this relate to clean water and sanitation? And am I going to take anything away from this, going forward? Or for those groups that are still struggling to find ways to get to camp, or in an area where, we're still in a modified pandemic stage and you can't go camping quite yet, we have all those other activities, whether it's things you can do at home, things you can do in your meeting, things you can just talk about in your meeting, as a follow-up to an activity. As you mentioned, it's just that making that last connection, making that, how does this relate to X? Or how have I contributed to Y? And that's exactly it. And that's where we're really hoping to help Scouters make these connections, especially because we know a lot of our Scouters are the people who are helping to create these review questions for youth. They're helping to guide them through the planning process. So how can this be incorporated? And sometimes it may be a deeper dive into, we have to carry in all our water for this camp. What did we learn? How did it impact us? If we had to carry all our water wherever we went, how would it change how we live? But some of them may be a more quick, in terms of things like reduced inequalities, like how did we help someone different today? Or, is there anything we did today that, may have helped someone out in the community who we don't even know? And that could be something as simple as, picking up some garbage or making sure that a pathway is clear and wide enough for someone who uses a mobility aid to get through. That's another big part of the goals. It's just kind of empathizing with people who are different than us, which is something we try to do in scouting, but maybe we don't always have the tools or the resources or the right questions.
And that actually just twigged something else in my mind, because it seems to me that especially now that we've overhauled, in the wake of overhauling the badge program, and especially with the introduction of top section awards for all sections, there's a real opportunity there. You mentioned things like clearing a community path, things like that, right? One of the components of getting, whether it's your North Star Award if you're a Beaver, or your CNE Award if you're a Cub, your Chief Scout Award, your Queen's Venturer, or the Rover Scout Award, right? One key component of all 5 of the top section awards is the completion of a project that benefits your community or your country or the world. I believe that's pretty much the exact wording in the badge requirements. And literally, like, that is a tailor-made requirement that you can slot almost any of these into.
Yeah, and using these as a jumping off point it's meant to be so helpful. I know that when I work with my pack and I'm trying to get my howlers to their CNE, they really struggle to come up with ideas. And it is absolutely not their fault. They're 10 years old. They only have so much experience to draw on. Right. But a lot of them, they default to, I'll collect food for the food bank. I'll pick up garbage, which is fine. Those are all very good projects. And especially if, they can do that next step of how, especially for Cubs, how do I get the pack involved? How can I make it a pack-wide or group-wide food drive? How can I get the whole pack out cleaning the park? Something like that. But there's tons of these projects related to Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a bit more of a way to kind of narrow it to a youth's interest, right? Are they interested in technology? Okay, maybe we'll look at industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Is there a way they can do a project that, an e-waste drive, or collecting technology for people in the community who may need it, or finding ways to help contribute to adaptive technology for people who need adaptive technology? And hopefully it'll go beyond that, okay, I'm doing a park cleanup because that's what Akela suggested and I can't think of anything else. Let's see what else we can do and something that's actually engaging and meaningful to our youth, right? Beyond just, I did it because I wanted my award.
Like, we've had youth for their CNE awards do things like clothing drives. And again, that was their thing they came up with, right? Which, and I mean, like, again, like, that definitely fits into the goal, right? Like, that's, I would slot that in under no poverty. Because especially around here and especially around now, not everybody has winter clothing and they really need it. Minus 20 outside with the wind chill right now and minus 30 tomorrow from what the weather says. So that's in Celsius, by the way. You can do the conversion if you're listening in the US. A cold. Or we had one kid who did a clean water drive. So like, basically it essentially came down to, for him, it was fundraising, right? And he did a whole bunch of different fundraising stuff, but it was all to, he had a set goal in mind for, I can't remember which program he went through. Like, it was one of those international programs, like Chalice or whatever, but it wasn't Chalice, but it was one of those international programs that works with developing communities in poorer countries. And they had okay, for this donation, we can install a clean water system in this community. So that was his goal, whatever that number was. And he was just, bake sailing and asking for donations and whatever else he could to get to that goal. And he did. But, clean water was the ultimate aim in that. Right. So, and I guess that is an important point too, is that, I mean, if you can do it at the community level, that is obviously hugely beneficial, right? There's something nice about the idea of subsidiarity where, like, the biggest change you can make is sometimes right next door. And if you can pursue it at that level, great. But that said, it does go to show too that you can pursue a lot of these different goals, even if the end beneficiary of the goal is like halfway around the world from you. There's things that you can do here that will be ultimately to the benefit of someone in a completely different country on a totally different continent. And all of that still fits under this SDG umbrella.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really kind of hallmark of this program is, okay, if you start at that local level, you've been working at the local level for the last 15 years in your pack, you do scout trees every year and you keep up with the trees, you make sure they're winterized, etc. What is that next step to take it to a Canada-wide level? What is the next step to take it to a global level? And why does it matter? And I think that's the other thing is, especially those younger youth, they don't necessarily know what's happening outside of their community. If we do a park cleanup, they can see the before and after. They can see the park was dirty and now the park is clean. But helping them take it to the, why does it matter what a community in Nova Scotia is dealing with? Or why does it matter what people in different countries are dealing with? So helping them to make those connections, even if it's not necessarily, we're going to go to a country and, another country and see what it's like to live there. But, why does it matter if we understand some of the struggles that kids in other countries might have? And kind of making it as accessible as possible, but still at an age appropriate level. Because that's the other thing is we know that every goal isn't going to be completely understood by someone who's 5 years old. That's not going to happen. But what can we do to teach them even a little bit about what a goal is about?
Well, and that comes back to, the structuring and the three-tiered program, right? The bronze, the silver, and the gold. I love that those colors have made a return because, of course, like when I was in Scouts, we had like the chevrons on our arms and it was like red, bronze, gold, silver. Some of the other badges had like multi-level as well. And again, like the badges would be ringed with bronze and silver and gold. So I like that color scheme's made a return. But just like how you've broken down, I'm going to have a ton of links in the document. Just because, there's a lot here that's worth highlighting, right? Looking at the sustainability badge, there's a 2-page PDF, Achieving the Sustainability Badge. And, it does point out, it's like, okay, well, we recommend bronze level. You need to explore a couple of projects, suggested section, beavers and cubs, silver level, Cubs, Scouts and Venturers. So, it does point out, like you said, that, not every one of these topics is going to be something that a 5 and a 6-year-old can grasp, but it does point out something like clean water. That is actually something you can teach to a 5-year-old, at least, or you can start to, right? Or the basics of, climate and taking care of the world, or the basics of like, hey, there are creatures that live in the water. We should really, be mindful that we are taking care of the water so that we can drink it, but also so that they can live there. And those are concepts that, a 5 and a 6-year-old can definitely begin to understand. And then as you move forward, the higher tiers are starting to introduce like education and inequality and peace and justice. And then the gold level is, where you're finding like no poverty, and that's where the economic stuff comes in. And so it is really quite well structured to meet the expanding capabilities and expanding ability for understanding of youth as they get older and stick with the program.
Yeah, exactly. And for each goal, we have tried to make sure there's at least 1 or 2 activities that even the youngest beavers can do. So, we're still running with clean water. I like this as an example because I feel like a lot of people kind of get it. Mm-hmm. You have things about like being a leak detective. A beaver can go around the house with their guardian, their parent, their adult, and, see about, is the toilet tank leaking? And, are the faucets dripping? And things like that. And understanding, the very basic of what can I do at home? Why does it matter? But then, of course, as we get into older one, we're looking at things like global solutions. We're looking at things like taking on a World Water Day project. We have partners like Water Rangers who tracks the health of local waterways using like citizen data. So collecting data at your local beach and checking on their platform if there's major changes and what might be causing them, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
But hopefully, again, we know that some of them, like economy, there's like two or three activities that are going to be very intro level. Why do some people have lots of money and why do some people have less money and why does that matter? Not getting into solving any economic problems at the beaver or cub level, but at the very least, maybe they can get a little start of why do people have different amounts of money?
Fair enough. So that seems to be sort of the broad overview of the program, and not even necessarily a broad overview, like fairly detailed overview of the program. Actually, I meant to ask, so the sustainability badge, does that go on the uniform? Is that a uniform badge?
It will be a uniform badge. I believe they are still in the process of updating the the uniform insignia charts. So those lovely pages of the pictures of the uniform with where everything goes. They are in the process of being updated. At this point, the badges haven't been released in the Scout shop yet. They are coming soon.
Okay.
For sure this time, for real this time. We've been hearing this for a while, but we actually, I think, have them in production at this point. So
awesome.
Hopefully by the time they're there, the insignia guidelines will be updated as well. So you'll know where to put them.
Okay. Well, and I mean, like, again, especially right now, things are a little bit wonky. I was just happy there was cucumbers at the grocery store today, like just stuff's wacky right now. But that does feel a little bit more familiar. There's always some little piece that's not quite ready for prime time when the rest of it is.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Cool. Okay. Well, I don't think I have any more questions, but like if there's anything that you can think of that we've missed, not touched on, this is a good time.
I guess the only little plug is for Scouters who are registered with Scouts Canada active with us. A lot of these sessions, we've done kind of very in-depth sessions as part of the virtual Scout Cons, and they are still accessible through the David Hughes Learning Center. I'm not 100% sure where they're hosted, if they're hosted internally or if it's an unlisted YouTube video. So I unfortunately can't speak if it's available to others. However, at the very least for internal members, you can find it on the David Hughes Learning Center. Everything from overviews of what the program looks like. There's at least one that's a very in-depth view of every single goal and what that looks like in existing Scout programming and what you can do to take your programming to the next step. So that's kind of, I think, the other thing area that I've mentioned, but yeah.
Awesome. All right. And of course, it is a bit of a tradition on the podcast here for, as we close out, to offer shout outs. So if there's, anybody that you just want to tag and name drop because they're awesome or they did an awesome thing, this is that opportunity.
I mean, we had our committee, we had a youth advisory panel, and we had a Scouts for Sustainability committee way back 2 years ago in early 2019, and many of their ideas are still reflected in the final program that came out. So that whole committee and our youth advisory panel who really helped us create that badge is definitely kind of big people behind the scenes who helped us to create an awesome program.
Awesome. And I suppose I should, toss a shout out Scouter Mike's way for connecting us on this one and making this a possibility. So, all right. Well, it's gonna be another shorter episode, but it's nice sometimes to talk with the people like with yourself and like with the last episode. People who are just they're in the know and they're on fire for the program, and they can just boom 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 get you all the information, and it's right there and it's done. Don't have to get lost in the weeds for an hour. So cool. Plus, I can hear some fighting in the next room that I should probably go and break up. Working from home. Okay, well. Thank you so much for your time, Siobhan. This was awesome. And thank you out there for listening. And until next time, be prepared.